Over the course of history, we've seen many popular games that come out that go on to be regarded as true classics even to this day. They become popular for having great gameplay or for having new graphics that haven't been seen before. But most importantly, they're good fun. However, there have also been some games made in the past which are just as notable but for all of the wrong reasons. Games that are so universally despised that it becomes almost the subject of legend. Games like Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, which I've made a couple of videos about in the past, are well known pretty much just for how badly they're made. And while a lot of games that are considered to be among the worst may be terrible, the thing is with each of them is they're all just one game, if you know what I mean. There's really not much to them. But what happens if you take 52 poorly made games, bundle them into one, and then release them at a rather ridiculous price level? Well, back in the 1990s, that did actually happen with a collection of games called Action 52. And in this video, I'm going to make my way through each of these 52 mini-games that have been, for some reason, put together into one, and see just how bad each one of them really is. So, let's get into it. Released back in 1991, Action 52 became very controversial, not only because of the fact that it was an unlicensed game for the NES, but also because of the suggested retail price of $199 US. But over the last 30 years, the standards for what makes a good game has changed so much, so I think it's fair to say that Action 52 deserves a revisit. Now, obviously, I'm not mental enough to spend that amount of money on a game, so what I've done instead is what most people tend to do for these types of videos, and well, I've got an emulator on my laptop because, as you've probably guessed in the past, my YouTube videos are made on a £0 budget. So, well, I've got rather a lot of games to try out here, so we better get started. As is commonly the case with most games, it opens up with a title screen which can only be described as very, very dated.
Make your selection now.
And then we have our menu, where we can choose all of the 52 games to keep us entertained for however long. A common theme you'll notice is that the titles of each game on this menu don't match what the games are actually called. In fact, they sometimes shorten words down or use different words entirely. First we have Fire Breathers, which is the only game out of all of them that's 2 players only. What you're supposed to do is control these dragonfly-looking things and shoot each other, although the biggest challenge of this game is finding somebody else who's willing to play it with you. Star Evil. This is the first of many space shooters on this game. You go left and right and shoot what look like Q-tips out of the front of this spaceship while avoiding the yellow and red walls. They'll kill you. There are also enemy spaceships that try and kill you. However, most of the time the game glitches and they fly straight through the walls. That's hardly fair, is it? Illuminator. Now, this game is actually somewhat unique. You go up and down these ladders in the dark while you shoot at the enemies to light up the room. How shooting at somebody makes a room light up, I don't know, but the downside of this game is that you can't really go anywhere beyond the few floors that you see on screen at the moment, which makes the game rather boring and repetitive. Next we have GeForce, which is pretty much the same as Star Evil except it's presented sideways. That's literally all there is to say about it. Ooze. This is one of the more well-known games of Action 52, despite being very simple. It looks a lot like many of the generic side-scrolling games that was trying to replicate the success of the Mario franchise. The controls of this one are quite bizarre. For example, you can't jump while you're running like on most games. You have to stop, jump, and then press right on the D-pad to keep going. That's bloody confusing. Silver Sword. In this one you walk around what looks like a forest and use the titular silver sword to stab the shit out of giant insects. That's it, really. Critical Bypass, which for some reason is spelt incorrectly. Anyway, the game itself has given me a headache just looking at it. Like many other games, you're supposed to fly around shooting stuff. Noticing a theme here. Also, what the hell is that thing? A mouldy fried egg? Jupiter Scope. Yep, it's another one of these games. This game is called Alfred in the Fetuk. What the hell is a Fetuk? Nothing. There's no definition, so clearly it's just a random word they've made up. This game doesn't seem to exist. Every time I launch it, it crashes the emulator I'm using. Here's what the game is supposed to look like, according to some footage on YouTube, but I can't play it myself. Operation Full Moon. I guess the moon is now a minty green colour. Anyway, in this game you control a moon buggy and you have to steer to avoid the various obstacles, including those cannons which will kill you. Next we have Dam Busters, which, judging by its title, I thought was going to be some sort of World War II themed game. It turns out you actually play as... who's that, Winnie the Pooh? Anyway, you're supposed to throw cookies at these green bears. Also, this one keeps glitching. Notice how he keeps hovering through the wall all the time. Thrusters, which is another space shooter. It's really starting to become clear why Action 52 was so poorly received. Haunted Hill. In this game you play as some sort of Jessica Rabbit clone attempting to defeat these very bizarre looking ghosts. This one is a lot like Ooze in that it's clearly an attempt at cashing in on the success of the Mario and Zelda games. Chill Outs. This game closely resembles the early Donkey Kong arcade games, except this one has an ice and snow setting. You play as this guy in a blue coat getting into fights with the similar looking guys in the grey coats, although this one seems to have some glitches of its own, just like many of the other games on this system. Sharks. This one is pretty self-explanatory really. Megalonia. The same applies for this one. French Baker. This one's very strange. You play as the titular French baker trying to throw rolling pins at various cooking utensils that seem to have developed minds of their own. Yeah, it's not very often you come across a game like this. Atmosquake. This one should look very familiar. Meong, which is the strangest title I've come across. To me this one looks like a puzzle game, but I literally cannot work out what I'm actually supposed to do here. Space Dreams, which is, you guessed it, a space shooter again. Although this one is different from the rest because you play as, what's that, a fetus? Shooting at what look like Haribo gummy bears. Streamers. This game is basically a shitty version of Doodle Jump. It works the same way, you have to climb up these platforms without falling, but there's no scoring system which kind of defeats the whole point really. Also, I don't know why there's a rabbit in a top hat on the side of the screen, but it doesn't really seem to mean much. Next we have Spreadfire, which is just a space shooter again, but with very peculiar looking objects. I mean, what the hell are those things? Bubblegum Rossi. You play as a girl who I'm assuming is called Rossi, trying to avoid getting killed by jellyfish who have the unique ability to not only survive on land, but to transform into a giant string ball. Well, this game certainly wins points for strangeness. Micro Mike. This game is so ahead of its time, it's basically a crap version of Flappy Bird. Speaking of which, imagine Flappy Bird with a horrendous amount of glitches and controls that just don't work half the time. That's basically what this is. Underground, which takes place underground. What I don't get about this game is that this guy who you play as can fall a rather substantial drop, but he can get easily taken out by these mushroom looking things on the floor. I mean, that's GTA level of logic. Rocket Jockey. You play as a cowboy riding on what is supposed to be a rocket, although to me it looks more like a giant plastic bottle. Anyway, the aim is to kill other people flying similarly shaped objects. I don't know what this backdrop is supposed to resemble, but moving on. Non-Human, a title which, in my opinion, perfectly describes whoever put this piece of shit game together. Anyway, I'm guessing these funny looking faces are supposed to kill you if you fall through, which is going to happen a lot because this game keeps glitching. Noticing a theme here? Crybaby. What the fuck is going on there? That's pretty much put me off talking about this game anymore. Slashers, which you would think based on the title is some sort of horror game. Well, you thought wrong. Instead it's a fighting game, possibly the most primitive one ever made. Crazy Shuffle. This one appears to be some sort of Pac-Man knockoff, except it's very difficult to play it because I can barely see the icons. Also, this game, like many of the others, is unable to hold anyone's attention for longer than a few minutes. Fuzz Power. I don't know what to say. What the bloody hell is that thing? Yeah, moving on. Shooting Gallery. This one starts with some flashing light sequence for some reason, and then it's a very easy game. Very easy. It involves shooting at some very strange looking creatures from behind a wall, meaning there's literally no way to die or there's no challenge at all. Lollipops, which involves playing as this guy hitting things with a giant lollipop, which you probably guessed. Evil Empire. Why is everything so small here? Anyway, you're supposed to defend these towers from all sorts of things, including sperm cells apparently. Sombreros. Despite the title, there aren't any sombreros around unless that is supposed to be a sombrero. It takes place in a normal suburban street, and you play as a construction worker destroying cars driving past. I don't know what the sombreros have to do with any of this. Here's probably the most infamous game of them all, Storm Over the Desert. Why is it infamous? because it features Saddam Hussein. Literally, that's him. Anyway, this game involves controlling a tank and destroying the pink tanks. Also, Saddam Hussein shows up again and is somehow 3 times the size of these tanks. I guess he's supposed to be the final boss in this. Here we have Mashman, where you play as some sort of BFG with no arms. The only thing you can really do in this game is destroy these egg-shaped items by jumping on them. This is seconds of entertainment for anyone who hasn't played a decent game before. They Came, which sounds like the title of a John Carpenter film. This one is another space shooter, except instead of the game scrolling up or sideways, you manoeuvre around these big blocks. And this one has crashed after literally seconds of me playing it, which is very good. Anyway, after waiting several minutes for the game to reload, I can play the next game, which is called Laser League, which for some reason is spelt incorrectly. Although this game is nothing special, it's just another one of these space shooter things. Billy Bob, this looks to me like some sort of bootleg Indiana Jones game. Anyway, you just have to run around and avoid getting killed by these giant arrows and boxes. City of Doom, this game involves climbing up a building while bombs fall from the top. You would think that the bombs would kill you, but they don't. Instead, you have to run into the windows to die. What were they thinking? Bits and Pieces. Here you play as some sort of zombie in a haunted graveyard, by the looks of things, although I don't know what sort of graveyard has tiger wolf hybrids and whatever those things are in it. Beeps and Blips, which has a very similar title to the last game. Anyway, it looks pretty generic if you ask me. I can't think of anything to say about this one. Manchester. This one surprisingly has nothing to do with Manchester at all. You just get into fights with these enemies and for some reason there are musical blocks everywhere. I don't know if that is supposed to reference the musical acts that have come out of Manchester. Who knows? Boss. I actually can't find anything to do in this one. I think you're supposed to run around as this dragon-like creature and shoot at people, but they don't really show up very much. Dead ants. I mean, they're ants, but they're not dead. Hambo. It's just this, where you have to make it through the door at the top of the screen while dodging the balls. Very simple. Time Warp Tickers. Well, this is a first for me, a game where you control a pair of fingers walking around a place that just looks totally incomprehensible. For some reason, whenever you walk into something it says time on the screen. I don't know what that's referring to. Jigsaw. Again, this one doesn't work, so here's what it's supposed to look like. Ninja Assault. It's just a generic ninja fighting game, as you probably guessed. Robbie Robots, which is a generic side-scroller with literally little to no challenge. And the 52nd and final game to play in this video is called Cheetahman. Are we going to end on a high? Well, firstly, unlike any of the other games, this one actually has a story. This guy, known only as the Action Game Master, whatever the fuck that means, was playing video games when at complete random this robotic arm drags him into his television and he comes across the titular Cheetahman who tell him of the enemies in this world. They then run away and the game begins. Despite that riveting build-up, this game is just as terrible as all of the others. The problem with this one is that there is really nothing to do, and that brings me to the end of this turgid journey of gaming at its absolute worst. So that was Action 52, and yeah, it's not hard to see why this game was so poorly received, and the simple problem is the 52 games that you have to choose from are all pretty terrible. A lot of them feel like the exact same thing, and sometimes they glitch or don't load at all, which makes them borderline unplayable. And I think there were at least 2 or 3 games there that just didn't load, so it's more like Action 49 or Action 50 and not really Action 52, so the title is basically a lie, which is not very good, is it? And also, who the hell would want to license a game like this? I mean, as I said at the start of the video, it's an unlicensed bootleg basically, and playing it definitely shows. I mean, Nintendo are known for being quite selective as to what games they put their seal of approval on, and clearly they didn't want to do it with this. I don't think any game company would want to license something like this. It would make them look really bad. So yeah, that was Action 52. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I didn't enjoy playing the game, but thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.